First, I apologize. I'm going to speak in English, which seems to be the common language of the panelists. אני תמיד אומר שהיחס שלי לעברית זה כמו יחס שלי לאשתי. אני אוהב אותה, אבל אני לא שולט בה. אז אולי זה עדיף שאני אדבר בכל זאת באנגלית. I'm very glad to see all of you here, and I am, of course, very honored to have been invited by Colette to chair this afternoon's session. Before I begin, I would be remiss were I not to echo the warm words that were spoken about Colette. I don't want to cause her any embarrassment, but I think she knows the esteem in which I hold her, and it's been a great privilege to have been able to work with her for many years, and I certainly hope we shall continue to do so. I'm sorry to say that anti-Semitism today is a growth industry, and those of us who thought that our children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren won't be able to work in this field were, of course, sadly mistaken. When I received this mission, and knowing that so much has been said about anti-Semitism, you know, sometimes you have the impression everything has been said, even if not everybody has said it. I thought what would be an appropriate starting point, what would be an appropriate way to begin in these very fraught times. But because the overriding theme of this conference is, of course, about Holocaust memory and Holocaust history and how to transmit this to future generations, I was gladdened but also sickened to receive from a very dear friend of mine in Brussels, some of you who are at least in the World Jewish Congress family, Serge Weinberg. He sent me a photo that he had taken on a street in Brussels. Yeah. So some of you, of course, are familiar with the so-called Stolperstein, which is an initiative that began in Germany some years ago, in which plaques are embedded in the street in front of homes that were once inhabited by Jews. And that initiative spread from Germany to a number of other countries in Europe. I must say, personally, I don't always like the idea because I don't like the names of people to be embedded in the street, because people are sort of walking on top of them and they're walking with their dogs and who knows what else. But when he sent this to me, I thought it was an appropriate metaphor for the situation in which we are living today. And as you can see, these 5 Stolpersteine mark the place in which certain Jews in Brussels had lived, and those Jews were deported to their deaths in the East. And here you see someone has vandalized it with the word Gaza, which of course doesn't need any explanation. And I think that's a quite appropriate metaphor of the times in which we are living. However, before I begin and introduce Michal and the other panelists afterward and offer a few other remarks, I would like to take my prerogative as the moderator of this session to dedicate it to the memory of 2 tireless people who struggled to deal with this phenomenon, one a historian, the other a journalist. Well, the historian, you heard his name earlier, Danny Danan alluded to it, and that's our very dear friend and mentor, Yehuda Bauer, who was truly a giant and somebody whose memory we will always cherish and whose absence here we feel so very acutely. And the other may be less well known to this audience, but some of you certainly know the name Marian Turski, who was also a dear friend who passed away at the beginning of the year, very shortly after he made a superhuman effort to speak at the ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the, well, one says the liberation of Auschwitz. I've never been comfortable with that term, but at least the 80th anniversary of the arrival of the Soviet forces at Auschwitz. And he will always remain engraved in my consciousness as a tireless fighter against anti-Semitism, and one who has offered us well, certain words of wisdom that I think we should take to heart, one of which I will share with you later. In the session that preceded this one, 2 sessions, you know, we also heard about the danger of anti-Semitism infecting academia and, of course, the social media, I would like just to draw your attention, and this is not the time in which to discuss it. We could have a whole nother event devoted to it, and that is the effect to which Wikipedia has been infected by this as well. I would argue, and I'm certainly no authority, that Wikipedia today is the most outstanding authority, font of information that's used by so many people, and very often unquestioningly. And we've heard, of course, about the problem of a lack of critical thinking. Younger people have not been trained to process information, and alongside Holocaust education, I would also argue teaching critical thinking is going to be one of the great challenges of our time. Well, I think I certainly have spoken far longer than I should have, but there is one person also, do forgive me, that I wanted to single out in this audience, and that is also a dear friend who's sitting in the first row, Ambassador Simon Geisbühler. Some of you have met Simon. He is, of course, a member of the Diplomatic Corps representing Switzerland, but he is also a pioneering historian in the study of the Holocaust in Romania, and somebody I am very proud to call a dear friend. So Simon, thank you on behalf of everybody for everything you've been doing over the course of so many years. Well, Michal, I think I have probably exhausted my welcome on this panel, as people are eagerly awaiting to hear what you have to say. And if I manage to extract your biography, which I seem to have done, I should give myself more credit, I will just say a few words about you. So first of all, Michal Kotler-Wunsch is Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and a senior policy and strategy advisor, former member of Knesset. She chaired and served on several key committees, and also as the first Knesset liaison to the issue of the ICC. She co-founded the Interparliamentary Task Force to combat online anti-Semitism. Michal's work focuses on anti-Semitism, international law, human rights, and Zionism. My dear, you have your work cut out for you. She has diverse academic and professional background, including roles at the Jewish Federations of North America, Nefesh B'Nefesh, and Reichman University in Herzliya. She serves as a trustee for the Rabbi Sachs Legacy, and perhaps not less important and more so, she lives in Ra'anana with her husband and 4 children. But also, Michal, on a personal note, I just want to tell you, there isn't a person in this hall who doesn't know the work of your dad, who we all greatly admire, and I have to tell you, I take personal satisfaction in seeing how very close the apple has fallen from the tree. So, Michal, without further ado, please take the floor.
I told Lawrence I learned everything I know from my father and my mother, but often you say the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. Gratefully, it hasn't rolled very far, should be the point. So thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to Colette Avital for creating once again an important opportunity, I'll say, at a timely moment that I could not exaggerate the importance of. Thank you to the ambassadors who are here and those that are represented on the panel that we'll engage with. So I was appointed to the role of Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism 3 weeks before October the 7th, 2023. I'll share with you that Israel traditionally did not have this role, Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism. I have counterparts from about 35 different countries, Canada, the United States, many European countries, South American countries. And devastatingly, all of my peers, special envoys for combating anti-Semitism, have been appointed over the last decade or so, because we are talking about, again, devastatingly, what is and has become, as Lawrence said, a growth industry. The fact that we have needed to appoint in any of those countries, including in the State of Israel, a special role for combating anti-Semitism is devastating news. And I'm here to perhaps share with you my analysis of how we got to this moment, with hope that it intersects with your very important understanding of the memory of the Holocaust and how fundamental it is, as Lawrence has shown in this slide, that we understand the reality that we are met with and how we got there. With your permission, and I really will share it, a legal analysis terminology, because I think it's critical that we understand, coming from the field of international law and human rights, how we arrived at this moment, that we would see the equivalency, I'll say a false moral equivalency, of what is happening in Gaza with the Holocaust. It didn't come out of thin air, and we would be remiss if we thought that it did. And so if I begin in the quick analysis with what is the systematic hijacking and weaponization of the international rules-based order and its institutions and its principles, created in the aftermath of World War II with a shared pledge of never again, I begin with a series of conventional wars from 1948, when Jews, a prototypical indigenous people, I insist on explaining indigeneity as a legal term too, prototypically indigenous, who speak the same language Hebrew, traverse the same land Israel, practice the same customs and rituals for thousands of years, the return of that people to an ancestral homeland after thousands of years of exile and persecution that is committed to equality. That's just Israel's Declaration of Independence. That's not me speaking. I pause there for a moment as we face everyday news, including of countries like the UK, France, Canada, and others, of understanding that at the foundation of some of the statements is the assumption, terribly false assumption, that the State of Israel is the 77-year-old reparation prize for the murder of 6 million Jews. So I'll say very clearly, as I have in many places around the world in these 19 months, Israel doesn't exist because the Holocaust occurred. It's not a reparation prize. In fact, it's precisely the opposite. A Holocaust could not have occurred had a State of Israel existed. Israel, as is clearly stipulated in our Declaration of Independence, is the nation state of the Jewish people, returned after thousands of years of exile and persecution, of which the Holocaust was the most systematic, immediate, heinous crime committed to equality. And if we actually understand that from 1948 until 1973, a series of conventional wars failed at their openly declared intent to annihilate the State of Israel. In 1975 begins the process that I would like to share with you that brings us 50 years later to what we see on the sidewalks, online, on streets, on campuses of the moral equation of the State of Israel with Nazi Germany. And that is the 1975 Zionism is racism UN resolution, passed in the UN. We have to understand it. Soviet propaganda, it wasn't invented in 1975, passed in the UN, alive and well on every university campus I visit, on the streets and the protests, online, in the name of progress 50 years later. Zionism is racism, as though it was rescinded about 20 years later. It mattered not. And if we don't understand that as the opening shot of an unconventional war for public opinion, then we don't know how to fight in this war. Zionism is racism, blood libel number 1, followed by, I'll fast forward, the implication of the 2001 UN conference, Durban Conference, against racism, and none other than Durban, South Africa. A conference against racism that turned into an anti-Semitic hate fest. My father was mentioned here as a human rights icon, returning from Durban in 2001. It was his and his counterparts around the world that participated in a conference against racism that turned into an anti-Semitic hate fest, with the overwhelmingly devastating understanding that it was their life's work, human rights, that was hijacked and appropriated to demonize, delegitimize, and apply double standards to the State of Israel as Jew among nations. And in the aftermath of the Durban Conference Against Racism, for the past 24 years, what we have seen is blood libel number 2. Israel is an apartheid state. Now, Israel is not a perfect democracy, as none of the democracies we know of are, but Israel is not an apartheid state. I'm old enough, and there are those of us that experienced apartheid, including in this room, that know precisely that Israel is not an apartheid state. Nonetheless, blood libel number 2, Israel's an apartheid state, has been marked across campuses in North America, in Europe, in Australia, with what is known as Israel Apartheid Weeks. Every single year, we now have 24 years of graduates who experienced in their 3 or 4 years on campus what is known as Israel Apartheid Weeks. And if I fast forward to the most Orwellian example of the hijacking and weaponization of international law, of its infrastructure, of its agencies, of its institutions, of its principles that have led to this reality, and actually what drives me to get on airplanes for the last 19 months in this role to try and sound the sirens of urgency. It is the hijacking and the appropriation of genocide, a term coined by Raphael Lemkin, whose entire family is annihilated in Auschwitz alongside Lauterpacht with crimes against humanity, in order to be able to describe atrocities too terrible to imagine, but not too terrible to have happened, that had no name, genocide, that demands intent to destroy in whole or in part a group based on their identity, and the understanding that it's that definition and the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, upon which in 1948 is created, on that definition that Lemkin creates in 1944, of course Israel being one of the first signatories of, that seats the state of Israel, the Jew among nations, Dreyfus, if you will, in a J'accuse moment, on the dock of the accused, in none other than the International Court of Justice, a court of last resort, by none other than South Africa, in response to the October 7th massacre, war crimes, crimes against humanity, openly declaring its intent to commit genocide by the genocidal terror organizations Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, of a genocidal Islamic regime in Iran, seated on the dock of the accused at the International Court of Justice, and with the use of that convention for the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, accused of the very crime that it is defending itself from. That is the Orwellian theater in which we meet in a 2025 reality, with not only the anti-Semitism that fueled the atrocities, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity of October the 7th, with hundreds murdered, butchered, burned alive, raped, abducted, each one of those war crimes and crimes against humanity, and I want to make very clear, the 58 human beings that continue to be held in standing violation of law and morality, and the international silence with which, not just since October 7, 2023, we have been met, but in the past almost 11 years with the case and cause of Hadar Golden, a deceased soldier that was killed and abducted shortly after an internationally brokered humanitarian ceasefire took effect in 2014, killed and abducted by the same Hamas into the same Gaza to the sounds of the same international silence, false moral equivalency, and impunity that enabled Hamas, a genocidal terror proxy that in its charter, like Mein Kampf found in its tunnels and dungeons, is committed to the annihilation of the state of Israel and murder of Jews, to benefit from international humanitarian law over the last 11 years to build the terror infrastructure of hundreds of kilometers of tunnels below schools, hospitals, mosques, and the list goes on. And so we meet at a moment in which it is genocide itself that has been hijacked and appropriated, in which it is the Holocaust and the memory of the Holocaust, and individuals like Anne Frank, who is displayed with keffiyehs around their necks in Amsterdam, that have been hijacked and appropriated. And if at this moment we do not understand what we are witnessing, which is that the ever-mutating lethal hate that has existed for thousands of years, for as long as Jews have existed, that didn't begin in 1933 and didn't die in Auschwitz, has mutated once more, using the same mechanism of demonization, delegitimization, and application of double standards, whether it is to bar the individual Jew from an equal place in society, or demonized, delegitimized, apply double standards to systematically barring the Jew among the nations, the proverbial Jew, if you will, that is the state of Israel, barring it from an equal place in the family of nations. And so that's why I begin at the UN 50 years ago with Zionism is Racism, continue with the overtake of academic spaces to continue peddling blood libel of Israel as an apartheid state, and that's before I've even spoken about the billions of foreign-funded dollars, including Qatari dollars, that have academic freedom, including in the United States of America at Ivy League universities. And finally, what we have witnessed in the aftermath or in response to the worst attack of Jews since the Holocaust, so that the very same anti-Semitism that fueled the October 7 massacre has fueled the responses to the October 7 massacre. Responses of silence. Me too, unless you're a Jew, including at the UN where I spoke 1 month after October the 7th, and has not remedied the then silence of the women's organizations at the UN. Responses of denial. And when I speak before Holocaust scholars, to me this is one of the most dangerous manifestations. Because I often share, whereas it took decades to systematically deny the Holocaust, I grew up in Canada in the 80s where Kijkstra and Zundel attempted to teach Holocaust denial. They were actually barred from doing so in Canada. Denial of October the 7th began on October the 7th. Even while its barbaric savages perpetrating their atrocities live streamed what they were doing, denial began. Responses of justification. Judith Butler, who I studied in law school, explaining that rape is armed resistance. If we think that should only trouble Israeli women or Jewish women or women, then we have another thing coming. And finally, responses of the attack of Jews and Zionists who believe in Israel's right to exist around the world. There are hundreds of percentages rise, according to reports, in the United States, in Europe, in Australia, in Canada. Hundreds of percentages rise in the attack of individuals who are identified Jews or identify with Israel, because, if I'm right in my analysis, that anti-Zionism is the modern, mutated, mainstream strain of anti-Semitism, you need not be a Jew to be the target of this ever-mutating lethal hate in this form. You need just be identified as or believe in the right of the state of Israel to exist, to be a Zionist, to be the target of this ever-mutating lethal hate. And so if I just move on to what we do with this and what we have to understand about this. Remembrance is not enough to uphold the pledge of never again. Remembrance is key, and we are told as an ancient people, thousands of years, of the word zachor that appears more in the Bible, in the Torah, that was desecrated on October the 7th, Shabbat Simchat Torah. Zachor is the first step, but it's an insufficient step. Remembrance, including in Holocaust education, actually fuels the modern day anti-Semitism, because imagine how evil you have to be to have suffered a Holocaust and, according to going practice, to perpetrate a Holocaust. Without teaching modern day anti-Semitism, including its modern strain of anti-Zionism, using the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition that enables to identify and combat all strains of what is an ever-mutating virus, from the good old traditional kind to the modern strain that demonizes, delegitimizes, and applies double standards to the state of Israel, the Jew among nations. Without that definition undertaken by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, actually parallel to what it was that developed in the aftermath of Durban, recognizing not only the mutation of anti-Semitism, but that the guiding social construct that anti-Semitism latched onto in our times, whereas in the past it was religion and science, in our times it is human rights. And so the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance created a comprehensive definition with 11 strains, and that is the key to teaching anti-Semitism today, including the contemporary strain that enables to identify and combat all strains. Without that working definition that's been adopted by more than 40 countries, more than 1,200 entities, is the result of a long democratic process, and by the way, of which Israel is currently the president of, IRA. Without that definition, I always say, you can't identify something without defining it, and you can't combat it without identifying it. Without that definition, we are partially identifying what is anti-Semitism. maybe the traditional strains, maybe the Holocaust denial strain. But after COVID, we understand if you allow the modern strain of a virus to spread, to infect, to fester, it unleashes all the older strains, which have been around for thousands of years in our case. They have not disappeared. And so what we are seeing around the world is the very devastating mainstreaming of anti-Semitism using this modern mutated strain as an acceptable strain of anti-Semitism. And remembrance for that is not enough. Remembrance demands that we reclaim all that has been appropriated. That includes the Jewish story. That includes our identity as an indigenous people. That includes Zionist as integral to the identity not only of most Jews. I say to people all the time, I can't just shed my Zionist pound of flesh to be a good human being. For thousands of years, my ancestors prayed and yearned and longed to return to Zion. Zionism, about a 140-year-old progressive national liberation movement, enabled the return of my people, but it's anchored in our identity, in our heritage, in our history. So reclaiming those are critical, but also reclaiming the international institutions, the International Court of Justice, the ICC, the UN itself, those principles I spoke about, the imperative to reclaim them. And finally, when I speak to an audience like this one, the imperative to renew the covenant. The covenant, not only our own, and as we are counting up the days to celebrating or marking, as we've come to say since October the 7th, because it's impossible to celebrate anything so long as 58 human beings are languishing in terror hell. Marking Shavuot, marking not just the covenant of our Jewish people, about 16 million people around the world, that's all that there is, but the covenant to the spaces and places that we inhabit in 2025 in a new reality in which, yes, 45% of us live in this nation state, 45% in North America and about 10% in the rest of the world. Renewing the covenant to the democracies, to the shared values that we all committed to, and understanding that, as the late Rabbi Sachs taught, anti-Semitism that has existed for thousands of years is the most reliable sign of a rising threat to humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. That is the role and responsibility that we have now, and remembering the Holocaust is a first step. Teaching that, as I said, anti-Semitism didn't begin in 1933 and didn't die in Auschwitz is going to be a critical step. Making accessible not only what anti-Semitism is using the IRA, but also what the state of Israel is, what the Jewish story is. I was told recently in Berlin that they have a project now, it's called Meet a Jew. There aren't enough Jews in the world for every human being to meet a Jew, but every single student can meet the Jewish story, understanding that the Declaration of Independence that stipulates precisely what the state of Israel is, not just what it isn't. As I said, the nation state of the Jewish people, returned after millennia of exile and persecution, committed to equality. What the state of Israel is, from my perspective, should be at every single Holocaust museum. So that the narrative that says, oh, Israel, that's that reparation prize for the murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, but look how bad they've been with a 77-year-old prize we gave them. Now they're committing a Holocaust, so we'll reclaim it and regift it to those calling for the annihilation of the state of Israel from the river to the sea. And so we really do meet an existential moment, not only for the state of Israel, not only for Jews and Zionists around the world, but from my perspective, for the international rules-based order created in the aftermath of World War II, so that never again. And if I end with a word of hope, so nobody tells me I'm despondent, if I end with a word of hope, I'll share that often people say when they meet me in person, you're very optimistic. And I say, no. No, I'm going to actually quote the late Rabbi Sachs again, who taught that optimism is the belief that everything will be okay. For the Israelis in the room, yeh beseder. But hope is the belief that together we can make it okay. In that sense, optimism is actually quite a passive virtue, whereas hope is an active one. And it takes not very much courage to be an optimist, but a great deal of courage to have hope. And I remind all of us that not only is it hope that carried our people for thousands of years as we carried it, but it is hope that is our national anthem, Hatikva. And so we meet at a moment that needs great moral clarity, action, and courage, but a moment that we have hope, remembering that it is our turn in our generation to renew the covenant, not just the covenant of fate, of which anti-Semitism reminds us time and again, but the covenant of destiny, in which we lean in to this incredible moment of challenge and opportunity, transcending and reaching across real or perceived differences to make sure that what we can do is sound the sirens that endanger, as I said, not just the state of Israel, not just Jews and Zionists around the world, but the very foundations of our shared society of humanity and of freedom. Thank you.
Well, first, thank you very much. I would not have thought it possible to compress the story of the malaise that is gripping us today in such a compact form, that was truly powerful and penetrating presentation, and I think it really sets the stage for what is going to follow now in our discussion. I might have mentioned that we have actually a very geographically, in that sense, panel, because we are going to start with a lady to my right, Mary Luke, whose biography I will offer you, but before I offer you, I'm sorry. No, I just want to say a few words about you, Mary. If everyone else has to blush, so do you. So Mary is a South African educator, human rights activist, Jewish communal leader. She is director and board chairman of the Durban Holocaust Center, which she established in 2008 to provide a resource for educators following the inclusion of the study of Nazi Germany and the Holocaust in the South African Education Department's national curriculum. Since 2011, she has served as an executive member and head of the Security Committee of the World Jewish Congress. Mary, I think we would all be very grateful to hear something about the challenges that you face in South Africa. I think all of us know at least the rudiments of what's going on there, and we are very grateful to you for coming here to offer us a more detailed and more nuanced picture. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lawrence.
Yes. Of course.
Thank you. So, thank you, Lawrence, and thank you so much, Colette, for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here. It's wonderful to be in Israel, and I'm very pleased to be able to share a little bit of the story of what's happening in my country around this terrifying matter of anti-Semitism. As Lawrence said, South Africa has become synonymous with the infamous ICJ case, but I think for me it was a reminder, Michal, my first responsibility in Jewish leadership as the chair of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies in the region where I lived, which is called KwaZulu-Natal, the city of Durban, was the infamous Durban Conference. And I was asked by the then chair, would I be prepared to take responsibility? We have a beautiful Jewish facility in Durban. There's a tiny community of about 1,400 souls. But we have a beautiful facility that was built in the 1930s and served, in fact, as an amazing facility for Her Majesty's forces during the war. Over 1 million Allied forces came to this Jewish community, turned it into a facility and canteen for armed forces who were traveling through the port of Durban. And we turned this facility into a space where the Jewish community of the world, including your dad and so many other wonderful, inspiring leaders, came from all over the world. It was an exciting opportunity. We thought we were going to have a meeting of great minds within the Jewish community and be involved in this conversation. And wow, how terrifying and how wrong we were. So just to start the discussion, I wanted to say this is a protest that I led in 2015. We've had anti-Semitism, pockets of it in South Africa and Durban, not much, but nonetheless anti-Semitism in the form that many of us understand. And this is outside a very, you may know the store Marks and Spencer. The version of that is called Woolworths in this is a food store with upmarket foods where a member of an organisation had placed a pig's head on what he considered or thought was the kosher meat counter. But we were now protesting against this pig's head. So these kinds of displays, of blatant displays of anti-Semitism, was something that we were aware of. But on October 7th, everything changed for us in a really, really big way. So I don't have to tell you that much about our government, other than to say it's been extremely difficult for our community. On October the 7th, on that Shabbat, we waited the whole weekend for the statement that we hoped would come out of the Department of International Relations in South Africa. This is a photograph of the President of South Africa then, and he remains the President, President Cyril Ramaphosa, with members of his party, and this became literally on October the 7th and since their traditional dress, so to speak, and I say that facetiously. On the 9th of October, we eventually received a statement which in essence says, you have it coming. It was so devastating for our community. Not only were we obviously trying to deal with the Jewish world, what everybody in the Jewish world is dealing with, but we now had to try and imagine how we were going to respond, how we were going to speak and respond on behalf of our community to this appalling response from our government. We had always had a full awareness that the South African government were deeply committed, and I'm saying this in all sincerity, to their Palestinian brothers, who they had a long relationship with in apartheid days. They had been trained by the Soviets in Soviet camps together. We understood that. We always had relationships with them aside from that. We represented, as the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, the Jewish community, and we always tried to talk to them about they're our mother, Israel is our father, we don't like it that our parents don't talk, how can we bring you together? We had cordial relations, in fact, good relations, despite the fact that there was somewhat criticism of Israel. This changed everything, and got to the stage where we were, this is the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, we were forced to fight back and literally go completely out of our comfort zone and take on our government in every possible media space and everywhere else. The photograph in the middle is a photograph of a building. It's a Ponte Tower. The building is insignificant, it's quite iconic in Johannesburg. But the point is, we were living in South Africa, watching the Eiffel Tower go up in blue, watching the Brandenburg Gate, looking at all these incredible displays of solidarity with Israel by governments around the world. And of course, we were never going to have anything happening in South Africa. So we at the South African Jewish Board of Deputies lit up Ponte Towers, took the photographs, and created our own version of support for our community. I'm pointing to a letter on the right-hand side. This was a letter, we took a full-page advert. We were sponsored a full-page advert in what is, in global terms in South Africa, it's the New York Times, it's the Sunday Times. Dear Mr. President, expressing to him our absolute disgust and horror, heartbreak, hurt on behalf of our community, that there has never been one mention of hostages. There has not been one mention of condemnation of Hamas. And then to the extent that we all wrote vociferously and endlessly, this is an article I wrote in Haaretz, we just stopped at nothing. Mainly in support of our community, but also we kind of realized that there was no going back, and that the cordial relationship that we had with our government was not going to be possible under these circumstances, and has not resumed to this day. We have no relationship with the African National Congress, who were the ruling party. We've had an election in between, and they are now the largest party in the coalition government, the Government of National Unity, which is a very new political phenomenon in South Africa. So just to point out that on the 10th of October, these are the kinds of rallies and protests, etc. This is noticed on the 10th of October, calling for people to gather in solidarity with Palestinian resistance, which ultimately led to a public notice of the office closure. Kindly be advised that the South African Embassy will be closed for business from Friday, the 17th of November 2023 until further notice. And this is from the South African Embassy in Tel Aviv. Just when you thought it was bad, the South African government's relationship with Hamas. It began with our then, the lady on the left, is a woman by the name of Mary Pandel. She was the Minister in South Africa of International Relations, and we got wind of the fact that she had a telephone conversation with her friends in Hamas. We immediately exposed it in the media, and we wrote and said we want a recording of the conversation, which they said they don't record it. We then took them to court on an access to information bill that we have available. The court case came back to say that they don't have records. But the point is, it began with a phone call, and ultimately the African National Congress and the Anglican Church hosting Hamas in South Africa. The photograph on the right-hand side is on the iconic steps of the St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town, the home of the late Archbishop Tutu, who was the icon of the apartheid struggle. And this is Hamas being hosted by the Anglican Church and the African National Congress. This is the title is The Jubilating Jamboree. The Jubilating Jamboree was an article written by a woman in the media in South Africa about a protest of tens of thousands of people. Pretty soon after the 7th of October, on the right-hand side, the beginnings of an IDF soldier and a Nazi, the analogy, and these kind of thousands of these T-shirts with anti-human slogans about Zionists, etc. The threat of violence and expulsion of the Jews were made public. That's what she wrote in the article. So this is the environment in which our community, we were trying to hold it together for our community. One of the really tough parts from October until May 2024 was that the African National Congress, in fact, took the apartheid struggle and inverted it into the support for Palestinians, and then turned it into this hate fest of Israel as their main election campaign. So this is the South African National Congress, the sitting government, the president on their left-hand side with his cabinet, with every opportunity, giving speeches with the South African flag wearing their keffiyehs. This was their campaign until the election last year in May, and I'm pleased to say what a flop that was. This African National Congress, if you have a look, the graph in lime green dropped to 40% of the vote, which forced them into opposition politics. And the irony of all ironies, the Gates Mackenzie started a party called the Patriotic Alliance. He's on the left-hand side with his partner Kenny Kuneni. We, the Board of Deputies, brought them to Israel, introduced them to President Herzog, gave them a really no rose-tinted glasses, real tour in his time in Israel, and he had the biggest increase in votes despite campaigning ferociously in support of Israel and challenging every detractor that he had about his relationship. And you went to visit Israel. Yes, I did. I loved it. As soon as I get into government, I'm going to bring Israeli technology to South Africa. Unashamed, he gained the most out of all political parties, albeit in small numbers, and the campaign the vocal campaign that the ANC pursued got them there again. Just to say that despite all of this, these are the anti-Semitism extreme left, you can see our January 2023 until the end of April 2025. And in fact, our anti-Semitism statistics are kind of back to where they were before, which speaks a lot about the people of South Africa. And that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about. The role of the people of South Africa. We have an appalling government that have used every means at their disposal, including using our community structures. And I want to make that point, that the 7th of October was a terrible day for us, and followed very closely by the 29th of December. After the 23rd of October, we had lots of challenges around anti-Semitism. You can see the statistics that it was crazy. We had no idea if they were going to sustain. We reached out to our president to say, as the community leadership, we need to come and talk to you. Jewish businesses are being boycotted. Jewish businesses are being targeted. People are feeling vulnerable. We're feeling incredibly anxious about anti-Semitism. Please can we come and see you? We repeatedly requested visits to the president, which he never replied to. Suddenly, on the 12th of December, everybody's going on holiday in the global south. On the 12th of December, we get a letter to the office, can we meet with him tomorrow? And we think, wow, it's so amazing, wonderful, it's finally got to us. And we terribly pleased to take him a presentation of this nature, showing him all sorts of raw footage of anti-Semitism. Little did we know that on the 29th of December, the papers for the ICJ would come out. And we would be cited in those papers as one of the attempts that the South African government had made to send the message to Israel, which was required in this court proceedings, that they had to have made overtures to Israel to explain to them that they were going to pursue this path and that they were disapproving of their actions. Because in the meeting, after we'd given our presentation, he got up, gave us a 10-minute speech about how Israel had committed genocide and said goodbye. We didn't think much of that at the time. But in the papers, it says, on the 13th of December, the president had a meeting with South African Jewish Board of Deputies and told them that they were going to pursue, that Israel was committing genocide. So we were the message. So our battle continues, and I don't have to tell any of you, we have multiple court cases, campus challenges, anti-Semitism, boycotts, and obviously, as we've heard so much about earlier, online hatred. So I wanted to bring one personal story to you, and that is, in addition to my work with the Board of Deputies, I did found, and I am actively and passionately involved in the German Holocaust and Genocide Centre, which I'm the director. And we have had, I work closely with my colleagues in Cape Town and Johannesburg. We formed an association, South African Holocaust and Genocide Foundation. In Durban in particular, I have been at the receiving end of horrible stories. I'm a baby killer, how can I run a Holocaust Centre? I should be tarred and feathered. I've been the trustee of the local Catholic enterprise, and I've had really close relationships with people in civil society. Many of you know the organization HIAS, Hebrew Immigrants Association. We have established, HIAS have established themselves in Durban. They work from our offices. It's been quite, I'm not faced by it, but it's been quite vocal. The latest thing is that the Catholic Association wrote to me to say that they no longer would like me to be a trustee. It's the places where we as Jews felt that we had friends in civil society, like-minded people who were active in human rights work. I'm starting to feel we're no longer welcome. And lots of stories like this, protests outside the centre where they're going to be handing over a memorandum that because they suggest that we create space for the opening of a historical exhibition of the dispossession, plundering, destruction of Palestine from 1917 onwards, as well as the categorical presentation of what the UN is presently defined as genocide currently occurring in Gaza. Those are the expectations of our detractors, and they're loud. They don't scare me. I don't like. There's this insidious infiltration of Jews are actually not welcome in our spaces. In places of intellect, in places of academia, and in places where I have always felt that I have a leading role. Having said all that, I do want to tell you that I live in an incredible country with amazing people, and they are not responsible for so much of this. During this time that we have been at the forefront of the fight to keep the hostages front and centre, but also to call for their release, we have been involved in many projects to bring awareness to bring them home. I grew up in Durban, the infamous Durban. The other part of Durban is it's a very famous surfing environment. The beaches are incredible, and we have many champion surfers, one of whom is a Jewish man by the name of Sean Thompson, who I grew up with. He has a track record of amazing views in California today, but we on the beaches of Durban created what I would love to show you. Oops, okay, help me to play this video, please. Just to say, I want you to look at the people who I live amongst. Early hours of the morning, where we were scared we were going to be chased off by detractors, we were embraced in a way that I wouldn't have believed. Thank you.
My suggestion is we'll continue to try to sort that out. If we don't succeed in doing so, Mary, we'll take your word for it. But thank you very much. I think we owe you a round of applause, just above all for your fortitude and for what all of our brethren are doing in South Africa. It's not an easy situation, to be sure. And I don't think that people who live in Israel fully appreciate the challenges of living in a place like South Africa, even for all the fact that there are many very good and fine people, and you've taken pains to point that out, which of course is hopeful, but on the other hand, it's clear that it's a very challenging environment in which to be a Jew. And so thank you very much for sharing that with us, and I'm quite sure that during the Q&A we will have questions, more detailed questions. It's my pleasure now to interview the gentleman who's to our far right. I apologize in advance. I've spent a quarter of an hour trying to learn to pronounce his name properly, but unfortunately when it comes to the Czech language, even as a Polish speaker, it's difficult. So Dr. Robert Řehák. Well, we're getting closer, you know, Rome was not burned or built in a day. He is the Czech Republic's ambassador at large, special envoy for Holocaust issues, interfaith dialogue and freedom of religion, and head of the Czech delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, with which many of you are very familiar. He's a graduate of the Charles University in Prague, I should say the fabled Charles University in Prague, which some of us know to be the oldest institution of higher learning in Central Europe, just beating out Kraków, so I apologize to our Polish guests. He also studied at the Hebrew University, and by the way, has an excellent command. We'll get to that in 1 second. He has an excellent command of the Hebrew language and also volunteered immediately. Would we prefer to hear his remarks in Hebrew, but just in order to keep the symmetry of the panel, we opted for English. And he is also a scholar who has specialized in studying biblical names and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and his scholarship is internationally recognized. I'm told by the technical team that we can run the video now, so before we put you on, Robert, and I understand you also have a audiovisual presentation. We'll watch what Mary has brought us. Before I pass the microphone over to Robert, just one moment. Before I pass the microphone over to Robert, I would also like to take the opportunity, as you see, it's my want always to speak about the people who are in our circle and some of whom are unfortunately no longer with us. And perhaps I should have mentioned from the outset a person who was known to many of you and who was often speaking from this podium, and that was our dear friend Alex Danzig, who was one of the hostages, an extraordinary man, somebody who really did amazing things in breaking down stereotypes and inculcating in the younger people and older folk as well an appreciation of the Polish Jewish experience. And I would just like to say we feel his presence here in this room, and of course our heartfelt sympathy to his family. I don't think anybody who has suffered through this, who has lost a loved one, will ever really be the same, but they know that Alex will always be with us in our hearts. So Robert, I'm sorry for that digression, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm Czech, and we Czech have a different approach. When it's the situation very, very bad, we use humor. Do you like jokes? Yes. Can I share with you a new joke that I never heard before? Yes. So there is a joke that Moshe is coming to Rabbi and he's complaining. Rabbi, my life is in ruin. My son lives bad life. My daughter stopped study. My wife is threatening me that she will leave, and my business collapsed. What I have to do? Please help me. And the rabbi looks at him and says, do you know what? Take a piece of paper and write there, nothing lasts forever, everything can change. And take the paper, put it on the wall to your room and keep it there. And look every day at the paper. After 1 month, Moshe is coming back, enthusiastic. Rabbi, it's great, everything changed. My son is going just to be married. My daughter came back to school. My wife is back and my business is flourishing. And he says, do you have still the paper there on the wall? And he says, yes. So keep it there. The situation is difficult, but nothing lasts forever. The situation in the world today is really critical. After the Corona, after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, after the terrible attack of the October 7 that we all regret, but nothing lasts forever, and we can change the situation. As Michal said here, if we make really efficient collaboration, we can change the situation. And when I was asked, and thank you very much to Colette Avital for this kind invitation, once more please for organizing this Congress. When I was asked to speak here shortly, I created for you a decalogue, like Luchot Berit, but decalogue of fighting anti-Semitism, and I would like to share with you. I promise I will be very brief, even there are 10 crucial things. So I would call it positive, multi-dimensional approach in post-October 7 world. What I mean positive, we have to have very tough laws, very tough people like Michal to speak to the world, but on the other hand, we need also positive and motivating approach. First of all, very close international cooperation in UN, EU, OSCE, UNESCO and others in order to get more closely with all the friends, like the Czech Republic is one of your friends in this world. In the United Nations Human Rights Council, and also to make more active and collaborating the special envoys. There are special envoys combating anti-Semitism in many countries, but not enough. Only few countries, they have special envoys like Israel has. And we would need it actually in every country will be a special envoy or somebody who is a diplomat with the task to combat anti-Semitism. We need to activate many international alliances. I became last year the chair of the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance of 43 countries with the Secretariat at the State Department, where on freedom of religion work approximately 50 people, and the annual budget is $50 million. And I tried also to introduce this topic of anti-Semitism to this alliance, and we issued very strong statement of the alliance on contribution of the Jewish faith and combating anti-Semitism. Because I don't want to just be on the negative sad part, but also you can see contribution. To let the people understand that if they don't combat anti-Semitism, they are losing. They are losing democracy, they are losing their own values, and they are losing the great values that bring the Judaism and Jewish people to the world. That's why I also, you heard maybe about terrorism declaration, which was organized in 2009 in the Czech Republic, and that's why I organized actually follow-up another terrorism declaration in Prague in 2022, and again we spoke about anti-Semitism, restitution of Jewish properties, and other things to keep those topics alive among the international community. This is the crucial task. And try to connect it always with very actual events, what is right now happening in the world. For example, if you see the young lady, third from left, this is a young lady from Ukraine who escaped because of the Russian invasion. She came to Great Britain and she found refuge in a lady who survived the Holocaust, and she accepted her in her house. She made video, because I declared like video contest for young people about the meaning of the Holocaust today. And on the video, there are two sitting in the garden, and the lady is speaking about the Holocaust experience, and the young girl about her experience to be also losing friends and that he had to leave the country because of the Russian invasion. And you can see that the topic suddenly starts to speak even to the young generation. That's the key. Second, we need to have clear definition of anti-Semitism, including the last anti-Israel manifestations, but also we have to make follow-up. 43 countries endorsed the IRA definition, but I never heard about the follow-up, like we will deal with what is going with this definition. Where are the judges that are educated in this definition? Where are the police educated in this definition? And I would like also to commemorate Yehuda Bayer, who was originally from my country. We always make some jokes in Czech together when we saw each other. Monitoring and research. Without the data, you can't have really good arguments. So that's why we in Czech Republic, we support the Jewish community every year to issue the data about the anti-Semitism. And you can see even our country, which is the island in Europe of pro-Israeli statements and also very deep sympathy and maybe hakesher hanestar bein ha'am ha'Czechi ve'ha'am ha'Yehudi. There is a mysterious bond between our two nations. Even there, you can see anti-Semitism online is growing. For education, this is the key, but I see that the most efficient way would be as schola ludus. Who knows what means schola ludus? It's in Latin, I will come to it. Do you know this rabbi? Maharal of Prague? who created, according to the legend, the Golem. He was a very famous rabbi from Prague who actually started to change the way of education. He said the children should enjoy education, not to be punished when they didn't learn. And his ideas were taken not by Golem, I'm sorry for the picture, but by Jan Amos Comenius, who was a great educator, and he, in 17th century, he published a book, Schola Ludus, that means learning by playing. So even about anti-Semitism, it would be great not to have it in the curriculum, school curriculum, but make it fun for children. I tried it, and you will be laughing about me, but that's fine. I'm happy when the people are laughing. First, I organized a soccer game among the Jewish and Arab children when I served in Israel here in 2009. At the beginning, nobody believed that it's possible, but I mixed the teams. So they were not Jewish children against the Muslim children, but they were mixed. And after 5 minutes was not important if the name of the colleague is Yitzhak or Muhammad, but if he passed the ball or not. And you can see I invited even the ambassadors to give them some rewards and presents because they represented, like they got the new identity of European countries and also the shirts. This experience, when the children were together, had to play, to cooperate, it's something that can provide them for the rest of the life. Another experience, Albert Einstein said the only source of knowledge is experience, was, and now will come the laughing, you will see me in a funny costume. I always ask young generation to come with the new fresh ideas how we can fight anti-Semitism. And the guy in the middle, he said, let's dress up as an Orthodox Jew, Muslim and non, and go to the soccer stadium, to the football stadium, and let's see what's happened. I was very afraid that we will be hit by somebody, because in Czech Republic, believe me, it's not so usual that Orthodox Jew and Muslim and non would come to the soccer game. There was a guy before we entered who started to shout like, oh, you sister, you are well, but these two should go. And I didn't know if he said to gas or something. But then we entered. We were not attacked, but as you can see on the picture on the right, we were watched like by many people, jokes, laughing. And then I understood that most interesting for me, it's not their reaction, but my own reaction. And I just changed the clothes, and I was in the middle of all attention. I was strange. The people were making like laughing and so on, and I didn't do anything. Just change the clothes, and I understood that it would be a great project for young people to dress them as a Jew and let them walk through the soccer stadium to see the difference. They would feel how stupid is it that the people hate people who just wear kippah or look different. Experience, this is the key. 5, step ahead in online and AI world. We are always one step behind the whole development, even the development of AI. We should reverse it. We should make a meeting of young tech people with people like us who tries to combat anti-Semitism and look for the ideas how to be one step ahead of and use AI and use even ChatGPT and other in order to help in our cause and not their cause. 6, support for victims and communities. We in the Czech Republic, many years ago, we founded something that calls Foundation for Holocaust Victims. Few years we prolonged the organization for years 2025 to 2029. We supported with a sum of 7 million euro, and from this fund, which is connected closely to Holocaust, are funded a lot of projects of young people combating anti-Semitism. commemorating Holocaust, and making step from Holocaust to combating anti-Semitism. 7, legal measures and enforcement. Everything what is crime in our world should be crime in online world too. And that's why I'm very happy that we try to develop some national strategies to combat anti-Semitism. So Czech Republic is one of the countries which is right now finishing through the process of actually accepting the new Czech national strategy for combating anti-Semitism, but we would need every country that would produce such a strategy. And also on the level of EU to have more positive laws like this EU Digital Service Act, which tries to limit the spreading of hate in the online world. 8, engagement of religious and community leaders. We can't be in this fight alone. We should to build coalition of community and religious leaders from all religions. You can see I organized a prayer in Bucha, the place of massacre in Ukraine, and we had Jews, Christians and Muslims, the Tatars, there, and we all were praying and speaking about against the violence, against the hatred, about reconciliation and peace. We in Europe, we are in very difficult situation because of the Russian aggression, but again, Jews, together with Christians and Muslims, we gathered and we made the letter to the community leaders in Russia, asking them help to stop the aggression and come with the peace. Lawrence is laughing because he's thinking probably about the Russian Orthodox Church. We received the answer even from Kirill, but it was like the Russian propaganda in other words. Political responsibility and rhetoric. I see big misuse of all topics, like Michal, she was speaking about the misuse of narratives, and I saw that also like Russia is misusing even the religion for their purposes. And not only that we can see that not only in Russia but in other countries, they are, if they need, they even play the anti-Semitic card, as we could see it in Dagestan, where the mob was attacking actually airport and looking for Israelis and US citizens. Last point, I said I will be brief, promoting a positive image of Jewish communities. I went to the School of Design and I met with the students. I told them the story of Jewish people in our country, and I asking them to draw pictures, and we published together this fantastic book, Hakesher Hanestar, Mysterious Bond Between the Czech and Jewish Nation. You can see we made even the exhibition out of the pictures, and in this project participated more than 40 students, and they drew fantastic pictures, and they actually created together this book, which helped actually to them to see the richness of Jewish religion in our country, and all the tradition, yes, and even the treasures like Franz Kafka, and it helps to promote the positive narratives, which can also in long term to combat anti-Semitism. I would like to finish by, you can see this is another example of very funny meeting that we met, and I was the moderator, young rabbi, young priest and young Muslim, and we exchanged jokes, because as I said, jokes are something that you can beat even the divorce effects. But I would like to finish with invitation. I will organize another conference in Prague in the middle of November about the international religious freedom or belief. It will be a ministerial conference, and we will again speak about anti-Semitism also, but together with all kind of hatreds like Islamophobia. You are cordially invited. And last, just picture joke. Here, this is the conference. Now, can you recognize the three dancing cancan? So Franz Kafka, Golem, and Chayal Ha'amitz Schweik. Thank you for your attention.
Robert, thank you very much for what I think we can all call an unorthodox presentation, and a very good humored one at that. And we are very conscious of what you are doing in the Czech Republic, and it's certainly nothing we take for granted. Though I have to tell you, I was laughing because you had this quotation by Einstein, and it reminds me of what was said, I think, by Martin Luther King, about nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And sometimes when I think about some of the people who perpetrate these acts of vandalism, just completely thoughtless, that's really quite appropriate. Last but not least, today we have the second Robert of this panel, and the one who has come the farthest to be with us today from down under, Australia. Robert Gut is a former barrister who has been deeply involved in the leadership of Jewish communities for more than 5 decades. He doesn't look it, including the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, the World Jewish Congress, the Claims Conference, Moria College, and the Sydney Jewish Museum. He was recognized in the 2014 Allgemeiner 100 as one of the most influential Jews, and he has also been listed and twice honored in the Order of Australia. He is also a very dear friend. Robert, the floor is yours. I understand you don't have a PowerPoint, so I can take my seat and not be away from you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And it was unfortunate that when you were talking about conscientious stupidity, you were looking at me. But what can you do? It's wonderful to be here, especially as a guest of Colette, who is everything that everyone has already said, and a dear friend and colleague. As Lawrence has said, I come from Australia. Before I talk about what has happened in Australia since the 7th of October and what we've done about some of the things that have happened, I want to explain a little about the Australian Jewish community. Australia was formed in 1788 as a penal colony of the British Empire. Britain sent to Australia the criminals that it didn't have room for in Britain. It put them on boats and sent them to Australia. And the very first prisoners that arrived included 5 Jews. So that Jews have been living in Australia since the white man first came. Aboriginals have been living in Australia for 50 or 60,000 years, but we've been there since 1788. There are approximately 120,000 Jews in Australia. The Australian population is 27 million, and until 30 or 40 years ago, there were more Jews in Australia than there were Muslims in Australia. The Jews are a very cohesive, Zionist, united community. 60% of school-aged children, Jewish children, attend Jewish day schools. And that is an important statistic when you look at the commitment of Jews to their Judaism and Jews as Zionists. In surveys that we've conducted, the identification amongst Jews with Israel on a serious level is in the 80 to 90% bracket. So Jews in Australia are Zionists. Now, there are now 120,000 Jews. There are close to 1 million Muslims, because there's been massive immigration to Australia. Australia is an immigrant country. It's a multiracial country. 57% of the Australian population either were born overseas or their parents were born overseas. And the Muslim population came largely from the Middle East. The Jews have integrated, not assimilated, have integrated into Australian society. They are disproportionately represented, as you would expect, in the professions, in science, in education, in commerce, business, as philanthropists, as the people who keep the cultural institutions going, the opera, the symphony orchestras, the theatres. And the Muslims, on the other hand, have integrated to a much lesser extent. Before the 7th of October, if you would have asked any leader in the Jewish community whether there was an anti-Semitism problem in Australia, they would have answered, no, there is not. Sure, there's anti-Semitism, but it's never been a problem. 7th of October, 8th of October, Muslim preachers in Sydney caught on camera outside the mosque expressing elation at the events of the 7th of October, setting off fireworks and crackers. 9th of October, the government of the state of New South Wales, the capital of which is Sydney, my hometown, made a decision out of sympathy with Israel and the Israelis to light up the Sydney Opera House, an iconic building known internationally, in blue and white. Largely Arab protesters decided to descend on the Opera House. The police didn't know what to do. They warned Jews not to come into the city. Not to come into the city and look at the Opera House lit up in blue and white, because there was a demonstration of anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, mainly Arab demonstrators. And at that demonstration, filmed on camera, the Israeli flag was burnt. There were chants of F the Jews, either gas the Jews or where's the Jews, and the police did nothing. They stood there. No one was charged, nor has anyone been charged in relation to that demonstration. But it had this effect. It traumatised the Jewish community throughout Australia. There had been at this stage no retaliation. Israel hasn't struck back. It was 2 days after the 7th of October. We were traumatised. The government was caught completely unawares, and it went from bad to worse. So this wonderful country of Australia, which had been wonderful to the Jewish community, and the Jewish community had been wonderful to it, changed literally overnight. And the manifestation of anti-Semitism, and I'm going to highlight some of the things, but not all. I want to highlight the things that occurred which we have done something about. Because as Mahal knows, I don't like to be despondent about these matters, and I want to talk about hope. And Danny Dayan earlier this morning said that our mission will never end, and our mission in terms of combating anti-Semitism and Holocaust education will never end, because anti-Semitism will never end. It's incurable. Mahal talks about it mutating. It has mutated, but now it's metastasizing. It's spreading like it's never spread before. It's spreading through so many organs of society. And you could argue, well, it must have been there under the surface. It probably was. But it's spreading, and it's spreading with such speed and with violent intent and hatred that is unimaginable and unprecedented in the lifetime of anyone living in Australia post-Holocaust. And we've tried to rectify it to the extent that we can, so that the police who stood by, we have arranged with the police to train the police in what is anti-Semitism, using that great resource that Robert's referred to, that Mahal has referred to, the IRA definition and the examples. We teach the police, we bring the police to the museums, we educate them. There were no prosecutions. The reason there were no prosecutions is that the law as it stood was very technical and almost impossible to achieve prosecutions. We changed the law, and there will be prosecutions in future. You may have heard about 2 nurses in a hospital who were filmed saying that they'd killed Israeli patients, or they were going to kill Israeli patients. They said that fortuitously 3 days after we had lobbied the Australian government to change the law to pick up that sort of crime, not knowing that it was going to occur. But if the law hadn't been changed, there wouldn't have been a law to deal with it. They have now been charged under the new law. They'll be prosecuted, they'll be tried, they've lost their jobs, a message will be sent. Demonstrations occurred outside synagogues. Worshippers were prevented from entering synagogues. There's no law to prevent people from demonstrating outside any place of worship. We formed a coalition with other religious groups, except the Muslims, and I'll come to the Muslims in a minute. And we lobbied the government to change the law so that now it is an offence, a criminal offence, to demonstrate outside any place of worship or to impede the progress of people to and from a place of worship. I said I would come to the Muslims because the Muslims in the Czech Republic have a different background to the Muslims in Australia, by and large. The National Imams Council of Australia, the collective of all the imams, issued a statement 2 weeks after the 7th of October, which did not condemn Hamas, which did not call for the release of hostages, but which referred to the occupation, the 76-year occupation. The National Imams Council, as a matter of policy, does not recognise the State of Israel and wishes for it to be obliterated. We, as a matter of policy, decided that as a result we would no longer include the imams in our interfaith communications, in our interfaith endeavours for the time being, and that remains the situation. I mentioned earlier the importance of the IRA definition. We have, and Robert referred to the importance of getting the IRA definition firstly accepted by more governments. The Australian government has accepted the IRA definition, and all the state governments have accepted the IRA definition. After the 7th of October, the Australian government appointed a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism at our request, and appointed the person that we suggested they might wish to appoint, who was a previous president of the Executive Council of the Australian Jewry, the roof organisation of the Jewish community. And we have now, and she, are now getting the IRA definition introduced into the universities so that they have a standard by which they can assess the conduct of students and staff on university campuses in terms of anti-Semitism. Not all universities are accepting the IRA definition. Some think that it limits academic freedom. Others think it limits freedom of speech, not appreciating that there is an obvious caveat on freedom of speech, and that is hate speech. But that's what we're doing, and it's working slowly but surely. We are using it as a tool for education. We are educating lawyers and legal bodies about anti-Semitism because, surprisingly, notwithstanding that they're highly educated, there are a lot of people in the professions who have been caught using anti-Semitic speech on social media with their lawyer's name and the firm name on the social media, and we're proceeding to have them disciplined by the appropriate authorities. I could go on, but I don't want to because time is short. But I just want to make sure that there is a particular problem internationally in academia, and Australia is no stranger to that. We have academics who are responsible for vile anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist conduct. One who publicly said that the Zionists should not be allowed to feel comfortable in Australia, and that she wished that 2025 would see the end of Israel, was a lady who was receiving substantial monies from government academic research grants. A lady who has received more than $750,000 in research grants. We lobbied to have, and this will be music to Gideon Taylor's ears, we lobbied to have the grants stopped and to insert as a condition of government grant for academic research that the recipient of the grant can't be responsible for hate speech or anti-Semitic remarks. And that's being accepted. Yesterday, a literary prize which had been awarded to a lady who wrote a book, it was discovered that she had also written some social media messages, including one describing Yahya Sinwar as a hero and a martyr. The grant was withdrawn, the prize was withdrawn, the money was taken back. In the creative and cultural space, Jews have been cancelled, Jews have been doxed. Doxing is a phenomenon whereby someone gets private details of a person and publishes them on the internet. That's now illegal in Australia. But cultural organisations have been tainted with anti-Semitic activity, anti-Zionist activity. We're working on it. A concert pianist at a concert in Melbourne, after the concerto finished and after he did his encore, got up and made a speech condemning Israel, genocide, apartheid state. His concert tour was cancelled after that. Slowly but surely, and this is the hope, slowly but surely, Australian society, the majority of the members of which are not anti-Semitic at all, they haven't been sufficiently courageous in standing up, some of them, but slowly and surely they're pushing back. The important thing that we have to do, in my view, is to ensure that what we're experiencing does not become the new normal. That the metastasizing has to be arrested, and we have to push back from the centre back to the fringes, where anti-Semitism will always dwell, but we have to recapture that middle ground, and that's what we're trying to do through these educational activities and our aggressive lobbying. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much for, first of all, that very succinct but very detailed picture of what is happening in Australia, which is also a country we don't often associate with this kind of activity. And of course, on one level, it's very sobering, it's eye-opening, but I think it also gives us hope that the leadership of the community is such that it is really taking very aggressive steps in order to rein this in to the best of its ability. We have a bit of time left for some Q&A. It had been my intention to do a second round, but I think everybody really has answered very well, basically discharged the obligation they had been entrusted with. I had wanted them to speak about the practical measures, but everybody actually did that without my prompting. So my suggestion is let's take 3 questions, but I would implore you questions and of course not statements. So there's a gentleman in the back with a green shirt. You have your hand on your head. That's you, sir. Yes, you are there. Could you please stand up? Do we have a microphone? Not you, sir. The gentleman behind you. Avi, do we have a microphone?
Not to choose and not
Sir, you've repeated yourself now. We fully understood the question.
for this Amisha organization, which is not the organization that deals with formal Jews that have to go back to Judaism. It's my family, Amisha. I just asked of Australian propaganda if I understood well. Did I understood well involve the special employee of the Australian government for the fight against anti-Semitism is a Jewish?
Yes.
Okay. I would ask
Jewish and a leader of the community, a former leader of the community.
Thank you. So I would ask our Czech relator to put point number 11 after the 10 points that he gave us, and that were very interesting. Point 11 is, please try to find a non-Jew as special envoy for anti-Semitism, or for this matter, as chairman of the national friendship association with Israel. I think it's a big mistake, and I'm not an anti-Semite. It's a big mistake to have Jews leading on behalf of the local government the fight against anti-Semitism.
Sir, I've made very clear. Just 1 second. We wanted to have questions, not statements. You've made very clear your thoughts, and just sir, you've made clear your thoughts, and just so that there isn't any misunderstanding, I don't have to speak in the name of our guest from the Czech Republic, but he's not Jewish. So, okay, you've made your point, sir. But that's not the question. That's a statement. He said that the person is Jewish.
Don't you think it was a mistake?
Okay. בסדר.
Sir, you've repeated yourself now, and we fully understood the question. Robert, we have two Roberts who can each answer the question.
Did he ask me? Or did he ask Robert?
He asked you. He said, "Isn't it a mistake?"
It's not a mistake.
Okay, that's
I'll tell you why it's not a mistake. Because it's important. The person doesn't have to be Jewish. What is important is that the person has to understand the issues. And usually a Jew, especially someone who's been involved in Jewish leadership, that knows the community, that knows the issues, usually that person will be Jewish. And if you had a non-Jewish person, as there are many special envoys who are not Jewish, many of them, most of them, the vast majority are not Jewish. They're very good because they know the issues. In Australia, the best person we could come up with was a Jewish person.
Anti-Semitism is something that should be fight by everyone. It's not important if Jewish or not Jewish. We all together should have to fight anti-Semitism and not make any distinction if you are Jewish or not.
Okay, there was a gentleman with a green shirt, second row. You were the second hand. But let's take two questions. And I'm so sorry, madam, you are sitting, I think, 3 rows behind this gentleman. Was your hand up? Yes. So could you stand also? So you begin, sir.
Actually, I would like to...
Oh, Ambassador, sorry, I didn't recognize you. Can you just introduce yourself to the audience?
I'm Daniel Sheck. I'm a former ambassador currently involved in the Forum of Families and Hostages. I would like to challenge a point concerning Micha's presentation, which was amazing, eloquent, and I completely agree with how terrible it is to compare October 7th to the Holocaust. It makes me cringe, even when it comes from Israel. I'll tell you where my problem starts. Your presentation somehow de-responsibilizes Israel and gives it a clean bill of moral health, which, quite honestly, my beloved home nation doesn't always deserve. And
Thank you.
Yeah. Just one more point. And actually, you bring a very good example to what I say when you challenge the ICC for intervening and for pursuing Israelis. I agree with you. Their level of criticism of Israelis is the threshold is much lower than usual. But wouldn't it help, for example, if key Israeli ministers didn't openly and publicly call for war crimes in Gaza? It would help, wouldn't it?
Ambassador Sheck, we're just going to add a question mark to after what you've said, madam, and then we'll take the two questions at once, just for the sake of time. Madam, just please your name and make it quick, because we have only a few moments.
I made Aliyah from Australia, from Melbourne, 55 years ago, and I can't believe what's going on there, although one of the reasons I came to Israel was that I just finished law school, and when I was leaving, one of my cohorts said, "Why are you leaving? You're a nice Jew." So this story of no anti-Semitism in Australia is
But you look like a nice Jew.
And until proven to the contrary, we're going to continue believing it. But what is the question? But what is the question? Yes.
I'd like to say to Mrs. Koffler-Hodge that I have felt for many years that this whole indigenous business about Israel has been totally ignored. Because I have been to Australia a number of times, any time a fly lands on the stage in Australia, you get this big recognition of the rights of Aboriginal people. If some non-Aboriginal wanted to take 1 square metre of land from the whites that came in 1788 from my history lessons, they had a referendum 2 years ago or something about the Aborigines, which was lost. And I'd also like to know what the Jews did during the period when there were 120,000 Jews and about the same number of Muslims until it became 1 million and 10 times as much, and I really don't think there's anything that they can do about it now.
Okay, there's a question in there. I'm going to offer one more last question, and that's also because we have another Australian in the audience, Greer Cashman of the Jerusalem Post. Greer, if you can just direct the question to whoever Okay.
Nobody mentioned where the worst cases of anti-Semitism exist. What is our biggest problem and where is it?
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe we start with you, Michal, if we may.
I'll just say thank you, Ambassador.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look, the very short answer is the outer word definition actually stipulates precisely what is anti-Semitism, but also what it isn't. In one of the first sentences that says criticism of the state of Israel or a certain policy or a certain politician, of course that is not anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism is the denial of Israel's very right to exist from the river to the sea. Now, it's very hard to explain to Israelis that are experiencing a reality from the inside out what actually is happening in the intersection of the reality here from the outside in. What we are seeing across the world, starting on October 8th, as we've heard in some of these testimonies, is the delegitimization, the denial of Israel's very right to exist anywhere. If you will, when I come to campuses, we don't want no Jew state, we want all of 48. It's one of the great catchy chants that we hear. So we really have to distinguish, and it's very hard not to get embroiled in our politics that are very important, and I will say, democracies everywhere are under a great deal of duress, and Israel is not special. The extremities in our polarizing, fragmentizing realities have taken over the moderate majority spaces and are dictating conduct and discourse, and we didn't even delve into social media and how that mirrors what it is precisely that is the business model of social media. But I would like to distinguish very clearly between what it is that Israel does as an imperfect democracy, like all other democracies, I remind us who the President of the United States is, and the differentiation of what we've seen of that from the tsunami of anti-Semitism that is raging around the world. By the way, tackling individuals, whether they self-identify Zionists or not, but the majority of Jews around the world do self-identify Zionists. And just to tag team with Greer, look, we've seen percentages like, ADL came out with their 10,000 attacks, and we have a rise that just came from Vienna, Austria, of 60% over the last year. But I want to say something about the statistics, and they are alarming, and they are important, and they take a picture. One is the many, many unreported or underreported events, or even unnoticed attacks. I'll give an example. In Vienna last week, a rabbi told me at the Jewish Community Center that some youth, he said to me, had an incident. Was it reported? No. Some youth, 16 or 17-year-old boys, waited outside on the corner of the Jewish Community Center, and as he walked into the center, he works at the center, they shot him with a water gun and screamed, "Free Palestine." Was that reported? No, it wasn't Palestine. It wasn't reported. On that very same day at UTE, the Technology University, it was what around the world people marked as Nakba Day. There was graffiti all over UTE. Was that reported? No. University of Austria, the same thing. So I want to say that the statistics are very important, and there are places that are worse than others. My guide is the places that were unable to unequivocally condemn the atrocities of October 7th, whether it was university presidents that I said this to, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and others, whether it was city spaces or law enforcement. If you are unable to unequivocally condemn the atrocities of October 7th without a but at the end of the sentence, the tsunami of anti-Semitism that then saw McGill, U of T, other universities around the world become infested with not just speech, but conduct that is not just anti-Semitic, but violent vandalism, is then the manifestation of that. And I don't know that we need to single out one specific city, because what this is a global mainstreaming that I'm trying to sound the sirens of, and not one specific moment in Amsterdam, in Toronto, or in Berlin, if you will. I hope that that answers the questions.
Can I add something to my answer to the first question? Without in any way detracting from what she has said. The reality is that if you're living in the diaspora, you live with the ramifications of statements from ministers of the government and other members of Knesset. The statement that no, I'm not going to talk about Yair or Ecuador. I'm going to talk about the joint statement by the foreign ministers of France, Canada, and the United Kingdom, in which they described unsparing and unprecedented Israel's renewed offensive as being wholly disproportionate, the denial of aid unacceptable, the scale of human suffering intolerable, and threatened sanctions. Now, I don't buy the veracity of that.
What's the problem?
But the fact...
What's wrong in there? Tell me, no, honestly.
No, I'm just saying...
Calling for the end of the war is not an anti-Semitic act. I'm sorry.
Ambassador, I think that this is, unfortunately, much as I would like to have this discussion, I don't think if we have 3 minutes less that this is really the forum. Please. Ambassador, please, wait patiently.
I'm saying that those sorts of statements, this is not from Spain or Ireland. They make the job, they reflect the issue that you raised, they make the job much harder, they erode support for Israel and therefore the Jewish community in the diaspora. That's the simple point I'm making. In answer to the former resident of Melbourne, I'm not going to buy into the welcome to country ceremonies and statements that are part and parcel now of the woke Australian existence. But the argument about Jewish indigeneity to the land of Israel is critically important. And Greer, wonderful to see you again after so many years. I would rank the problems: academia, because they shape the minds of people to come; social media, because it's so hard to counter; and media, the old media, because it's, with the exception of you, no doubt, journalists today tend to be of a particular mindset and persuasion that makes it very difficult for us to get our message across. Thank you.
Robert, if you can, in just a few seconds.
I think that really the level of anti-Semitism when the hostages will be released and the war will be over will go also down. It's also my big hope. But to the question, I would like to finish with a joke, if it's possible. Sure.
Absolutely.
There are 3 friends are meeting and they are asking what was the happiest moment over the year that passed. One was French, one was American, and one was Jewish. The French says, you know, my happiest moment was when I was in French Riviera. I was in a great restaurant and we had great dinner. fish, candlelight, great French wine. The American says, you know, we made the cricket and my team came to the final. And the Jewish one, you know, I was in my flat in Moscow and 3 a.m. knocking on the door. I was very afraid. I came to the door. I looked through the peephole and there were 3 strange guys with long coats. So I trembled and asked, what do you want? And they asked, is our comrade Ivan Ivanovich at home? His name was Moshe. So my wish, if we speak about anti-Semitism, that nobody has to have fear, and that Jewish people and Jews around the globe will be exactly like the French ones and the American ones.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add something for you to think about. I took my prerogative as the moderator to dedicate this session to the memory of our dear friends Judah Bauer and Marian Tursky. I just want to share with you something that Marian Tursky told us on the 75th anniversary. Again, I don't like the word liberation, the 75th anniversary of the arrival of the Soviet troops. And on that occasion, he said very memorably, Auschwitz did not fall from the sky. It began with small forms of persecution of Jews. It happened. It means it can happen anywhere. That is why human rights and democratic constitutions must be defended. The 11th commandment is important. Don't be indifferent. Do not be indifferent when you see historical lies. Do not be indifferent when any minority is discriminated. Do not be indifferent when power violates a social contract. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just food for thought. Thank you very much to our panelists who have been really extraordinary. Please remain in your place. Colette is going to make a presentation.
I think Robert would like that. In America, they say it's never over before it's over and the fat lady sings. So I'm not a fat lady, but it is over, and I just wanted to thank you all with a very small little gift. Michal, you're the first. No, I'm not singing. I'm not singing. I'm not singing at all. Okay. The fact that it's pink shouldn't mislead you. Okay.
And
okay.
Before...
Just one more word. I really am very thankful. I never knew how this would work. We're looking into the future with hope. We're not victims. We know how to defend ourselves. We know how to fight back. Thank you all. Thank you.
Before we leave, first of all, I'd like to thank Lawrence for his show. It was like a talk show, you know. I'm only the best supporting actor, but I mean, okay, voila. And I want to thank again everyone that worked on this. This was a cooperation between us and Yad Vashem. Inbal is here, Iris is here, I don't know where, Meirav was here. They are our partners, and time after time אנחנו נוכחים שהם שותפי אמת שלנו, ואנחנו מרימים פרויקטים וכנסים, and thank you everyone that stayed till now. If you want to stay more, it's okay with us. We are leaving, but I mean, תודה לשורדי השואה, תודה לחוקרים, תודה לשותפים שלנו, ותודה לאורחים מחוץ לארץ. Thank you very much. Thank you.